Great, thank you. And for everyone on the call, the big subject that we're here to talk about today is compliance. We know that's a very important and very top of mind topic for everyone on the call, and probably most recently as some people are beginning to go through audits or recently went through audits. But what we're trying to accomplish here today is compliance and how data drives that compliance, and how do we get there as an organization. I just wanted to remind everyone that we will be at the 3rd annual Optimizing Appeals and Grievances, improving your ODAG and CDAG outcomes in beautiful Baltimore in 2 weeks, March 21st through the 23rd. Myself and our account executive, Pat Getz, will be on site. So if you're able to join us, please stop by our booth and learn more. So when we talk about adding process automation to drive compliance, a lot of times from the folks we've talked to, they ask, great, yeah, we obviously want to do that, but where do I start? I typically always start by saying, whenever we're trying to tackle a problem with the solution here at CureWorks, we try and start by thinking outside of the box. And this is a real quick and neat story that we've learned going through the conference circuit, and it's the VanMoof box. Just very quickly, there is a bicycle company that was spending a ton of money shipping their very high-end bicycles, and even with that expensive shipping, a lot of those were being damaged, and they're having to be returned, having to be sent back. So they were trying to develop some different ideas. Well, maybe we'll do a white glove shipping method. Maybe we'll do some advanced type of packaging material, and all of those ended up eating up into the bottom line. And a lot of the people in that organization had just been there for quite some time and had recently hired some fresh faces. And one of the newer employees jokingly said, well, just put a picture of a TV on the box, maybe that will work. And everyone kind of giggled, but if you think about it, flat screen TVs are shipped every single day. Hardly any of them are ever broken on delivery, and sure enough, that's what they ended up doing, and it worked. And their damaged boxes went down, I want to say something by 80%. So this is actually a box, but funny story just to illustrate kind of a thinking out of the box mentality. So what are some common issues that can lead to not having correct data, not being compliant, and how can we solve them? Some of those common issues are misclassification, timeliness, the ability to track those outreaches, incomplete universes. What are some very high level ways that we can solve them? What are some ways that CureWorks uses in their solutions to solve some of those issues? One being predictive analytics. So we'll talk a bit more about that shortly. Intelligent classification, the ability to identify certain data points in fields at a very high level to be able to pick out a path for those appeals and grievances to go through so that we can ensure we're getting all of that correct data, we're recording all of it. And we talk about that correct path. We talk about process intelligence and automation. So if we, at a very high level, can grab the appropriate path that a certain appeal or grievance or even inquiry needs to go down, we can direct it through that process so that we're ensuring that we're performing the appropriate tasks, that we're recording the appropriate information, and that we're processing those appeals and grievances on time. And what's another way that we can ensure that we're processing them on time? using some of that predictive analytics and that process intelligence, we can generate automated reminders, whether it be to an analyst or an auditor that's working that case, or to an MD that has yet to make a decision, or to claims to cut a check on an overturned decision. All of that is pre-built into our appeals and grievances solution. So overall, we talked about some of the issues and how we can solve them, but at a greater sense, how are we doing that? We're doing that by letting the data itself drive the process. And I alluded to this a little bit when I said we have those predictive analytics and that process automation driving those appeals and grievances through a defined path based off of the data we're collecting from the moment we receive those appeals and grievances. We're ensuring that those are going down the appropriate path. And as items change, there's a unique path for each decision, even further on down the line. So how exactly do we do that? That intelligent classification, what we've done is we know that based off of a case type, based off of a priority, who submitted that particular appeal or grievance, and whether or not it's pre or post service, what we've done is we've mapped out the correct path for every combination of these scenarios. And what we've done is we've built it into the solution in such a way that you can control if you have additional tasks outside of compliant ones that you want to make sure you're completing, or if the rules that CMS dictates change, you are in control of that. So you can see here, we've taken those 4 different data points for that scenario. We've created a code that this path goes down, and we've also allowed the end users to control the number of days till due. So in this case, we know that this type of case needs to be completed within 30 days. Because that's in your control, because this is the way it comes out of the box, you can easily adjust that for a tighter SLA. And how do we know what we're doing within those cases? Well, each one of those scenarios takes advantage of all of our work items and activities in those templates. So we know, one example right here is that the submitter was a representative for that beneficiary. We know that if we're not dealing with the member, if we're dealing with one of those representatives, we're going to need an AOR, right? And we know that we're going to need that before that case becomes official. We have a concept of pre-official and post-official. And you can kind of see in these generation statuses here that we have a couple of items that are pre. So we want to complete that member AC outreach, and we want to make sure that we're generating that AOR, we're providing an additional outreach, we're then verifying it later on. So not only are we controlling, what our SLA is based off of a unique scenario, we're controlling what tasks our team is completing, but then even furthermore behind the scenes, we're keeping track of the history of that appeal or grievance, so that all of those dates and times that come up later on in the universe, we're automatically populating that behind the scenes. So let's take a look at, what we call the evolution of process automation and improvement. And we've kind of broken these down into about 5 different stages. And as I go through this, I want everyone to be thinking, where does your organization fall within these 5 stages? And more importantly, where are your competitors? We talk to a lot of different organizations within the healthcare payer space, and we've seen them all. We've seen some folks in that very basic initial stage, and not as many, but some folks in that fully optimized space. And what our goal is to take you from that initial to that optimized level. So when you think about that initial level, it is, I cannot stress the first bullet point, it is utter chaos. It is paper intensive. Everything is on paper. There are always workarounds. There's not a defined process, and because it's on paper, you're doing your data entry after the fact. Whether it's error prone because we've fat fingered something, or error prone because we didn't jot it down on paper or forgot to input it later on. There's a lot of issues with this, and these folks are essentially just surviving. Now, as we advance a little bit more, we're getting a bit more organized, but one of the bigger issues is that we're still spending time tracking these documents because it's still paper-based. And one of the biggest issues, if we're not tracking this in a system, and all of these appeals and grievances live on paper today, we talk about the term, well, that fell between the cracks. We've heard many stories where documents, whether it be the appeal request itself or a letter that was supposed to go out, has literally fallen between the cracks, between desks, and that can cause a lot of issues further on down the line. At the very least, causing that particular appeal or grievance to go out of compliance. Now we're beginning to have a defined process. We've gotten rid of a lot of that paper. We now have electronic documents. And this is a major milestone, because now, again, we don't have the risk of those paper documents falling between the cracks. They're available to be on more than one desk at a time, since they're electronic. So we can have multiple process paths happening at the same time through those network shares. We've documented our process flows, so we have a loose idea of those paths that those particular appeals and grievances need to go through based off of their characteristics. We might be taking advantage of versioning. So when we talk about correspondence, whether it be to the member, the provider, or that member's representative, we're tracking the life of those documents. Maybe we're beginning to define different roles and groups. So we know that certain activities, certain tasks, work items that users need to perform are defined by their role. And we're almost there at this point. We're becoming managed. The problem now is that, hey, we've made a big jump. Complacency starts to kick in. We're getting more structured. We now have some routing involved, so we're not relying on the end users to make sure that those documents are going to the next logical bucket by themselves. And we're beginning to take advantage of some automated data entry, so we're not relying on those end users to punch in those dates or those values that may even need to be translated later on for your universe. And then lastly, something that adds a little bit of protection for the future, in that we have that historical reporting. Maybe that's business-based reporting, maybe that's audit-based reporting. And then lastly, where we want everyone to be with the help of our solution is the optimized stage. So, we have straight through processing, but we also have the flexibility for when exceptions come up, and then we have those defined processes for those exceptions. We have not only historical type reporting, but we have real-time actionable reporting. One of the areas that we're always still surprised to hear is that a lot of folks struggle with just getting an accurate depiction of their current inventory. And another big one when we talk about the inventory is that financial risk. So if we were to total up the claim amount for every appeal in our system today that could be potentially overturned, a lot of folks don't have any idea what that financial risk is. And then they take that one step further and say, for those appeals that we've overturned, there's a dollar amount associated with that. And maybe claims hasn't cut a check to close that appeal out yet. We have a certain financial risk at that point that we may not be aware of yet. So that's a great example of some of that live real-time reporting. And then lastly, again, those automated reminders, the automated generation of your correspondence and those predefined paths that are able to handle those one-off exceptions. So once we've reached our optimized stage, I just want to highlight again, what does all of this result in? So those defined paths and processes, not only are they defined and they come with the solution, but you can control them. You can modify them as your needs change, as policies change, as regulations change. We talk about that real time and that historical reporting. So complete accountability. Within the CureWorks Appeals and Grievances solution, we're tracking every single action that occurs on a case, an appeal, a grievance, a document, whether or not someone viewed it, if they printed it, if they've changed a value, when it changed hands, when they've generated that letter. All of that is recorded and it can't be turned off. So we really have not only accountability for ourselves and our team members, but accountability in the aspect of a future audit. We talked about automated correspondence. One of the bigger issues that Pat and I have heard is that, sometimes folks fat finger items on a piece of correspondence out to a member or a provider. That's if they picked the right piece of correspondence. We've seen a lot of organizations that have, 50 different templates they use. We've seen some organizations that have a couple hundred different templates that we use. And in an area that, has the risk of being, having some high turnover, it's costly and it's not time friendly to train and to bring on, new staff members. So when we talk about that automated correspondence, we're not only talking about bringing the appropriate values onto the pieces of correspondence for you automatically, but we're also talking about the solution knowing the right piece of correspondence to generate at the right time. So gone are the days of relying on members of the team to choose the appropriate letter and to make sure the appropriate information makes on that letter. The CureWorks A&G solution does that 100% for you. We talk about timeliness reporting. So whether or not that's a regulatory, your regulatory timeliness reporting, or timeliness from a business perspective and within your own, maybe tighter SLAs, that live reporting to see where we're at. And then additionally, we talk about our dashboard reporting. So live, actionable, real-time dashboards that give you your at a glance. So what's my current inventory broken down by case type? How many cases do I have spread out amongst each analyst or auditor on the team, and what's their average time to completion based off each of those cases, which is a really good way to highlight, who your rock stars are or who may be needing some additional assistance. And then, probably the most important are those 3 days before an appeal or grievance is due. So that next 72 hours, being able to reallocate work if necessary and getting a quick breakdown in the ability to access those appeals and grievances directly from a dashboard and have all of that be color coded so that you can know these 5 appeals and grievances are due today. They're at the top of my list. I need to work with my team to make sure that those are handled as soon as possible. And last but not least, our team tasks and statuses. So we've made a fundamental switch within our solution to be really pushing people to take advantage of these dashboards, because not only from a management perspective can you see where all of the members of your team are, what they're working on, how many tasks they have, what the type of tasks or activities those are, what status those appeals and grievances are in, and maybe they're in the hands of another area, another department. Maybe they're in a nurse or clinician or medical director's queue. We can get a really quick idea of how long it's been in that queue. Or maybe it's been waiting for payment from claims for X amount of days. We can have all of that actionable intelligence right in front of us. And then for the team members themselves, there's a one-stop shop to see all of the required activities they need to do based on date and based on those cases or appeals and grievances they're working. And then lastly, probably the biggest headache of them all is the ability to populate your ODAG and CDAG universes with one click of a button. You know, a lot of folks struggle with this when they're performing their audit readiness or their tests to make sure they are ready for those. Within the CareWorks Appeals and Grievances solution, as soon as an appeal or grievance is completed, it's available to be reported on within the universe. And all of those translations are there for you automatically. You know, the big ones being those months and those times in the unique CMS format, but also, you know, items that may be a checkbox in your solution today, if you're using an Access database, perhaps, are translated to the appropriate, you know, Y, N, NA for this particular reports, excuse me. So just to give you an idea and so show some actual screenshots within the application itself, you know, one of the examples I highlighted earlier was the AOR generation. In this particular case you're seeing here, you know, we have this case assigned to Pat, and because he's the auditor or analyst in this case, he knows that as soon as this comes in, we need to generate that AOR document. We have a due date, and again, that's customizable by you. So whether or not we want to say this needs to happen within 24 hours of this case being received, we can set that time and have it adjusted specifically to you. Now, this is a good example of a document that we generate, but you know, in AOR, that's pretty basic. That's for our level 1 case. What about when we make our way to a level 2 case? So, you know, maybe we've decided to uphold that particular appeal, and now we need to create our level 2 packet. All of that is built into the solution as well. So, you know, even if it's not on your organization's paper, maybe it's on a document that's dictated to you by an outside entity like Maximus, we can appropriately fill those documents out and combine them for you into one single packet that can easily be uploaded or sent to the IRE. When we talk about those tasks, we saw that the first one was the AOR, and then the second slide I showed had to do with 2 documents within that IRE packet. Well, once we open up that task or that work item or activity object, you can see here for one, there's one button to press. There's no decision on what document am I going to populate. There's no having the user populate those letters themselves. With the click of that one button, that document will be displayed to the end user if it looks acceptable, and they can simply hit OK. And then your printing strategy is completely up to you. We talk about required data translations. So this is an area that, you know, even if you're not using our solution, I suggest is a very good best practice. Whenever possible, you know, your analysts or your clinicians, your medical directors should not be typing information in. Whenever possible, we want to use a data set, because if I'm choosing from one of, in this case, 3 different values, there's no way that I can type the wrong thing in. And when we talk about those universes and those data translations, if someone fat fingers a value, or maybe our database administrator didn't take into account that, you know, we can take an uppercase or lowercase u on our denial upheld, it won't translate. And then that value will be blank on your universe reporting. So I cannot stress this enough. Always use data sets whenever possible, and then your translations, you have a much higher percentage chance of those translating correctly. We take advantage of that wherever possible. So what does all of this work result in? You know, obviously we want to get to a complete and a correct universe. But because of all that work we've put in, we've gotten a ton of other neat things built into the solution, all just trying to achieve that end goal. Again, that first one is a complete and correct universe. So what you're seeing here is a quick screenshot inside of this solution of one of our ODAG tables. With the click of a button, I've populated this, and with the click of one additional button, you can see blinking here, we can export this in that exact same format right into Excel. What else does all of this result in? So we talked about timeliness reporting. So if we think outside the box of just our required regulatory timeliness reporting, here's a quick screenshot of historically how we've performed in the past. So based off of year in the top left, then it'll drill down into quarter, month, week, day. We can drill down as far as we need to get our timeliness for that time period. And then we can also get a percentage of it. So we always want to be at 0 untimely. Right now we're at 2.8, so not the greatest, but give just a real quick insight into how we look. Along the top also you have a date picker range, and then an individual threshold for each type of case we have in the system, and then each particular case we may want to drill down into below. Untimely ones, of course, are highlighted in pink. I alluded to our at-a-glance dashboard. So this is the screenshot of that. So how many are due today? How many are expedited? How many are pre-post service? How many total active? And then we talk more about those thresholds. So right now on our standard pre-service appeals, it's taken us about 17 days to complete those. Our internal threshold is 20, so we're actually trending about a little more than 2.5 days better than where we set our threshold. Now our expedited cases and our post-service need a little bit of work. And with the glance on this dashboard, in about 2 seconds, we can get that idea, as well as our analysts that have completed cases in the past 7 days and what their current assignment is. And then if you remember before, I talked about those next 72 hours, what's going to make us or break us. What the assignment looks like, a threshold in the top left. We're only at about 7 cases, so we're trending about 13 under where we typically want to be. So we're in fairly good shape. And then a breakdown by all of our users. And if we were to click on any one of those charts, it's going to constrain our bottom list of cases or appeals and grievances down here that are color-coded by due date for us to open up and perform actions on if necessary, reassign if necessary. Finally, one of the items that were recently added to the solution is the ability to get a good idea of what your star rating looks like within the areas that appeals and grievances control. So this is just a great example of, based off of the information that we're collecting, we can estimate what your star rating would be, but also explain to you how that calculation was derived based off of information on the right. So just to kind of wrap up and sum everything up, we've improved our process. What did we get? We got compliance, we got quality, we gained a ton of efficiency and automation, and then most of all, a cost savings. We've empowered all the members of our team to perform more efficiently, and we've gained greater insight into our process, allowing for some of those cost savings. It looks like we're ending about a minute over, but again, I would like to say thank you, and hopefully we can see most of the folks on the call in 2 weeks at the 3rd annual Optimizing Appeals and Grievances in Baltimore. And I will hold on the line for an extra couple of moments if there are any questions.
Thanks, John. I don't think we have any questions at this time. If anybody does have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can do that through our website. If you have John's email address, you can zip him a note directly. We're always here to help and answer any questions that you may have. So thanks for joining us today, everybody. Have a great afternoon, and we look forward to talking with you again.